Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a total paradox in the world of audio engineering. We are going to figure out exactly why modern music producers are absolutely, undeniably, obsessed with a dead, massively expensive, and deeply flawed 100-year-old technology.
I mean, think about this irony for a second. For decades, producers and engineers spent literally millions of dollars trying to eliminate analog tape's inherent physical flaws. Fast forward to today, they are eagerly dropping cash on sophisticated software plugins just to artificially inject those exact same flaws back into their perfectly clean digital recordings. It is wild.
So here is our roadmap for This Explainer. We'll start with the birth of magnetic tape, move into the multi-track revolution, break down the actual mechanics of the machines, explore those famous audio flaws, and finally, look at tape in the digital age. Section 1. The birth of magnetic tape, a century of sound.
Our story kicks off over 100 years ago, and honestly, it involves international espionage, wartime secrets, the whole shebang. Magnetic recording actually evolved from a Danish inventor's crude steel wire back in 1898 to a paper tape format used by German radio during World War II. And get this, that massive leap forward was a closely guarded secret. The Allies had no idea it existed until Major Jack Mullen discovered it in 1945, bringing the tech back to the US, where Ampex built the first mass-produced professional machines in 1946.
Now, the absolute game changer here was something called AC bias. Around 1939, a guy named Walter Weber basically accidentally discovered that adding an alternating current bias dramatically improved audio fidelity compared to the older DC bias. To put the sheer scale of this upgrade into perspective, the frequency ceiling more than doubled, pushing all the way up to 15 kilohertz. It also dropped distortion down to just 3% and vastly expanded the dynamic range from 40 to 65 decibels. This gave German broadcasting a massive upper hand during the war, pumping out high-fidelity audio that completely baffled the Allies. Moving on to Section 2, the multi-track revolution, changing music forever. Okay, so following the war, legendary singer Bing Crosby actually brought this high-fidelity tech to US radio. But the true, earth-shattering revolution for music production happened in 1953 over at Ampex. See, the old way of layering audio was a destructive process called sound on sound. If you wanted to layer a new track, you had to record directly over previous ones, which severely degraded the audio with noise. The brilliant solution came from Ross Snyder. He invented cell sync, which stands for selective synchronous recording. For the first time ever, engineers could do pristine, completely non-destructive overdubbing. It was a total paradigm shift. And the crazy part is how much Ross Snyder underestimated his own breakthrough. He literally said, "I thought the market would be confined to a few dozen at the absolute most. Not many, but those who did needed it badly." Well, a guy named Les Paul, the guitar innovator, bought the very first 8-track cell sync machine for 10 grand. That single purchase essentially laid the mechanical groundwork for how every single classic album from the 60s, 70s, and 80s was made. All right, Section 3, Mechanics of the Machine, inside the tape recorder. If we really want to understand why tape sounds the way it does, we got to pull back the curtain on how these things actually work. Tape is basically millions of tiny magnets. We call them domains, sitting on top of a polyester strip. And when it comes to recording, physical real estate matters a lot. The wider the tape, the more tracks you can squeeze onto it. A standard 1/4-inch tape handles mono or stereo, but if you step up to massive 2-inch tape, you can support 16 to 24 separate channels of audio for large, complex studio productions. So as that tape gets dragged from the supply reel to the take-up reel, it passes directly over 3 specific metal heads, which are basically the mechanical heart of the machine. First up is the erase head. It uses a high-frequency bias to completely randomize those magnetic domains back to a 0 state. Next, the record head alters the magnetic flux based on whatever audio you're feeding into it. And finally, the playback head induces that magnetic flux from the tape back into an electrical current so we can actually hear the playback. Which brings us to Section 4, the flaws that create character, the sound of analog. Dragging physical tape across these metal heads at speeds like 15 or 30 inches per second creates some pretty severe mechanical irregularities. And ironically, these are the exact flaws we love today. Take wow and flutter, for example. When the tape speed slightly wavers as it moves through the transport, it creates distinct frequency modulations. Wow affects the low frequencies, giving you this slow, undulating pitch bend. Flutter hits the higher frequencies with a much faster modulation. If you've ever tuned into a lo-fi hip-hop beat, that cozy, wobbly, nostalgic sound, that is wow and Flutter.
Then you have drift. This is an even slower modulation, happening way down below 0.1 Hz. It's usually caused by mechanical issues, like a pinch roller failing to spin consistently, or unequal reel speeds. What it does is result in these tiny, creeping tempo changes in the music. The waveforms slowly expand and contract, literally breathing organic life into what would otherwise be a perfectly static recording.
We also can't forget about scrape flutter. Because the tape is held under strict tension as it moves from reel to reel, it literally vibrates back and forth as it scrapes against the metal heads. Think of it like a guitar string being plucked. This incredibly rapid modulation, happening between 1 and 5 kHz, adds a very unique, resonant, harmonic coloration to the sound. It's distinctly recognizable as that classic tape warmth. And finally, the elephant in the room, tape hiss. This is an inescapable, constant high-frequency noise floor. It's just the result of the sheer randomness of the magnetic oxide granules on the tape itself. And let me tell you, engineers absolutely hated this back in the day. They pulled their hair out for decades, developing aggressive noise reduction systems like DBX just to try and bury that hiss. All right, final stop, section 5, tape in the digital age, emulating the past. So, if these massive machines required intense daily calibration and were packed with inherent flaws like hiss and flutter, why did they actually die out, and how were they reborn? Well, the tragic fall wasn't just about digital audio workstations being more convenient. It came down to extreme economics. The price of a single 2-inch roll of tape, which, by the way, only yields a mere 33 minutes of recording time, skyrocketed to over $300 a pop. It simply became financially unsustainable for most studios. Because of that, we've ended up with this massive divide in modern recording. On one side, you have the analog heavyweights, elite legacy studios like East West that maintain incredibly expensive Studer and Ampex machines to record, mix, and master fully to 2-inch tape. On the other side, you have smaller modern studios operating completely in the box on iMacs and basic interfaces. They rely on incredibly accurate software plugins to digitally add that classic tape warmth back in.
And that brings us to the ultimate provocative question to wrap up this explainer. We live in a world where a cheap $60 hard drive can give us over 200 hours of absolutely flawless, mathematically perfect digital recording. So, why do we still spend our hard-earned money on software to intentionally emulate a 100-year-old machine's flaws? Why is the human ear still so irresistibly drawn to the beautiful mechanical imperfections of the past? It's something to think about the next time you listen to your favorite track. Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating topic with me today.